If I can just turn to a different question. In your contacts with British and American military commanders, did you feel at the time you were there that they would have liked to have had substantially more troops on the ground in order to carry out the task that they were being expected to carry out?
Yes, they were always under-resourced. Ambassador Bremer has spoken in public since his time in the CPA that he himself asked for a larger number of troops in the summer of 2003. Military commanders were always stretched. It was clear to them that the borders were open. They did not have the troops to guard the ammunition dumps, which had more than 1 million tons of military equipment, explosives, ammunition in them. They were not able to police the streets as a police force which was otherwise absent from Iraq. They were assuming, it comes back to my insurance point earlier, that the Iraqis would do a lot of this themselves, but in the event that was a misplaced assumption. And they realized how short of boots on the ground they had to do everything that fell their way.
Although the outgoing chairman of the American Chiefs of Staff had warned the Senate in testimony in February of that year that they were going to need hundreds of thousands of people to deal with the task after the event, but he had been rubbished at the time for saying this, if I remember rightly.
General Shinseki said that he thought 500,000 troops might be necessary for the post-conflict period, and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz said that is ridiculous. How can you need more troops for after the conflict than for the conflict?
And if you'd been asked in September of 2003 which of the two was right?
It was undoubtedly my view all the way through this that more troops should have been allocated from the beginning.
Time is about to run out, and we've, I think, benefited enormously from two rounds of testimony from you. I wonder if I could just ask two questions about essentially your overall view. Throughout the whole process in which you were involved, do you feel that the United Kingdom had a significant impact on the process of policy formation in the United States towards Iraq? I mean, you've talked about one specific episode of vetoes, but just looking at it in its broadest sense, did we succeed in influencing it?
Yes, we influenced it in certain detailed ways, but that cannot hide the fact that we were uncomfortable about the low level of planning for the post-conflict period, had worries about under-resourcing, and were never able to persuade the Americans, sometimes were not given an opportunity to explain to the major respect. I think our influence was too low, but it was too low for the reason that we were in resource terms, a minor partner.
And finally, you were there in the period which you have described as the one of catastrophic success, at the time in which the coalition was paying the price for the catastrophic success of winning the war so quickly, and was paying the price for the lack of, or the failure of, planning for the aftermath. And we were essentially making it up, having to make it up as we went along, in a very different environment to the one we'd expected. Now, you've already drawn a number of important lessons from this, and we're on a lessons learned exercise. Are there any other lessons for future policy making that you would draw from the whole Iraq experience?
Well, I think there are a number of lessons, and I think that the full range of them will probably need another session. But there are two in particular. One is to regard the aftermath as just as important a mission as the military action period. Secondly, to put security first, because nothing can be done in the political and economic spheres, etc., without security. Third, to seek as wide as possible an international input into an international operation of this kind, with the legitimacy that will lead to that and which flows from that. And fourthly, to be much more aware of where the gaps are, where the limitations are going to be, and to try and address those early in security, political, resource, economic and other terms before you begin. This was clearly, from its history, too rushed an exercise for the size of the task that we found on the ground, a task which some people had been predicting would be as difficult as it was. So to have this degree of mismatch is something that has to be avoided in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Jeremy. I think that probably has given you the opportunity to make any final observation for this session. There may be more to say. So with that, can I say one thing for the record? I think you used the term the FCO third room. Could you, just for the record, for those who don't know that term, explain what it is?
An FCO section is, or was in the days when I joined the FCO, composed of the head of that section, the deputy head of that section, and the third room, which was, as it were, the engine room where the bureaucracy gets done.
Thank you. Well, with thanks to you and to all of those who've attended throughout this morning, can I close this session? The next hearing will start at 2 o'clock this afternoon, when we're going to be hearing from Lieutenant General William Rollo and Lieutenant General John Cooper about the military's role in the south of Iraq, and they both commanded the MNDSE. They also had a senior military role in Baghdad later on. We heard in the course of this morning about the, I think I call it the United Kingdom Triangle, Sir Nigel Shinewold, Sir John Sawers, and we shall be hearing from both of them tomorrow afternoon, along with Desmond Bowen. So that's a trailer for the afternoon session tomorrow. Now, that concludes this morning's session, but I would just want to say I interrupted the broadcast briefly this morning because there was a mention of sensitive information, and as it's defined in our published protocols, and so we had to interrupt very briefly. Thank you.